Pileggi Technical Services, your computers and electronics concierge service. Welcome back. Today we're taking a look at a sign that somebody gave me to fix. Now this has already been gutted out. How this is a sign is there's a piece of plexiglass that fits over the front of this, and this is basically just a light box. Now originally there were the Circuline style fluorescent lights in here, and they went around. One was here and the other one was right here, and then in between were two transformers or small ballasts. They look like transformers, but they're basically ballasts. And then this was just the mains lines in that came in, and they were wire nutted in, and then it just had this long wire that came out the bottom with one of these inline switches. And the problem was that, as you can see, this inline switch broke, and also the plugins that were on the Circuline bulbs had cracked from age, and they needed to be replaced. So what I initially did was brought this to my father, who was an electrician, and was hoping he was going to be able to get the replacement parts from one of his distributors, and unfortunately he wasn't able to do that. So what he came up with, an idea was to how to retrofit this with two straight lights, which, as you can see, fit pretty good in here. But the problem is the distance from the bulbs to the plexiglass is not good enough. This has to actually be lower down, like how this one is. And I said, you know, after a while of not really working on it, that I need to get this finished. So I came up with an idea of cutting strips of wood and laying them in here, and then getting LED tape and putting the LED tape on, and also replacing the line input here with a 3-wire that doesn't have an inline switch, but instead it has one of these toggle switches that'll be mounted somewhere inside the case here that's accessible from the outside. And then inside will be a 12-volt transformer, like a 2-amp 12-volt transformer that will power the LED lights. And the idea I have was, instead of just getting single strips of LEDs, they make them with double LEDs side by side, which would be much brighter. And if you space them out enough, I think this will diffuse the light pretty nicely. Also, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to clean this up and actually mask this black part off up here and spray the inside of this with a silver spray. The white will reflect some light, but the silver is going to reflect it even more so. Not that the LEDs are going to put out a lot of light towards the back, but if any light happens to bounce off the inside of that plexiglass, I want it to kind of have a reflective surface to just further increase the effectiveness of it. So I still have to order the parts. I have everything figured out that I need. I just have to figure out how long this cord is. I haven't measured that yet, because this looks like it's a pretty nice long cord, and I want to make sure I match that. I do have, obviously, the switch. I have the paint. So this video is going to be broken apart across, you know, as many times as I'll touch this project. So I might come back to it sometime later today. If this is painted today, I may come back to it in a week or so when I get the parts. But either way, we'll see you later. Here's a bit of an update. I got the slats cut. They're just about 10 inches. I didn't do any precise measuring with this, just a rough estimate, because ultimately it's going to, you know, the length of the actual strips of LEDs are going to indicate how long the particular strip for each one is. In other words, some of the strips can be cut every inch or every inch and a half, and I won't really know that until I get the actual tape in. So that's what's going to determine how long I can cut the individual LED strip to. I just wanted to make sure I can get the maximum amount of space I can in here. And these are all just, you know, sitting here. I have to figure out exactly how to mount it. One of my ideas was to use the existing holes, mark this piece of wood from the other side, and then just drill it through, and then using some bolts and some screws, just connecting it that way is probably the best way. As you can see, I have the slats mounted inside of the cabinet. They're not bolted in from the back. I just got done drilling the holes and just getting a preliminary fit here. I am using two different size screws, because this is what I have on hand. I actually got these from a surplus, which is really great. But you can see these are 8/32 by inch and a half, and the other one's by 3/4 inch. So what I did was I taped the board in the back to the inside of the case, flipped it over, marked the holes, took it out, drilled out all of them, and then I positioned them in here. And what I did was proceeded to put the short screws in the areas where it fit, obviously, and then where I wanted to put the slats, I substituted for the longer ones. And then what I did was I came back and drilled secondary holes on each one just to keep them stable. And I'm using the shorter screws in those situations because it's not going through the case, it's just going into the little recess behind it where the light used to sit. If I pull this out, you can see what I mean. So the shorter one's going into that little cup down there. So how this is going to work, these are going to get mounted first. I'm going to pull this all apart, obviously. I'm going to screw them in so they're attached to the back slat. And then I'll slide this in, and then I'll connect it to the case. These are, you know, obviously a good midpoint connection, but I'm hoping to put the power supply here. I'm not sure exactly how big it is. It looks like it might fit down in here, which would be even better. There is plenty of space. The way I set this up was this is 2 inches in, this is 3 inches. Same thing over here, 3 inches and 2 inches. In the middle was just whatever was left over. And obviously these will become stable once they're bolted in. But that's what I have for now. I'm going to get these tightened up. It's raining out. I'm just in the shed now. I can't paint, but I'd like to be able to spray this too. Ultimately, the inside will be sprayed, like I said before, silver. And then once I get the tape, I'll measure out where they're going to go, and then I might spray paint this too. I haven't figured that part out yet, but I also made sure there was room in the back here. For that. It's actually over here, sorry. This is the hole for where the wire is going to poke through from underneath. This is going to have to get drilled out because I'm using 18.3, and this had 18.2 in it with one of those little squeeze fit plastic grommets on there. So I have a larger one for that, so I'll have to make that hole too. Also, this is where I'm going to mount the switch, so I'll have to get that cut out. I might do that today too. Here's the completed frame. I just have the bolts sitting in it now, so I know where they go when I take this apart later on, but this should hold nicely. These ones on the edges here are each going to connect outside to the back of the case, and then the rest of them obviously hold the slats in place. I also have this marked just in case this comes apart. I don't remember how it goes together. Also, I'll shoot over to here and you can see the inside of this case. These are obviously the holes where it's going to mount into. This is a nice rigid point. This is where they had the clamps for the fluorescent lights, and I'm quite sure the weight is going to be just the same, if not maybe a little lighter than what was in here before. The ballast was kind of heavy. But yeah, just got to get the parts in, and when this rain lets up, maybe I'll get the stuff painted. I'm also going to see if I can get that hole drilled, like I said. Here's the hole drilled for the switch, and I'm going to use this nibbler tool to square it off. And that is how you turn a round hole into a square hole. And then this guy should just pop right in. See my nifiki. All masked off and ready to paint. And here it is after 2 coats of metallic silver paint. You can see it's pretty reflective. It's getting both the light from inside my shed here, and if I step over this way you can see the blue hue from the sunlight outside. So that's going to reflect the light nicely. Here's a little update on the LED conversion for this sign. This is a couple days after I painted it. You can see I followed that black line as much as I could. There's a little bit of a apprentice mark here where I missed. But other than that, it's in great shape. This isn't really super necessary. It's just going to bounce whatever light shines back into the box that might reflect off the back of the plexi inside of this. Just to give it some extra, light. Next step is to cut the LED tape to fit the wood strips that I have cut for this. And that should start soon, actually. I have everything in stock to do that. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the LED tape that I have. This is a Super Night LED tape. This is a 16.4 foot roll, which is 5 meters. It's not red, green, blue as pictured, but it's white. It's actually cool white. You can see it's actually dual row tape. Now each one of these LEDs has 3 light emitting segments. There are actually 6 LEDs per strip of light, per segment of strip. And there's enough of those segments to fill the whole 5 meters, which gives you a total of 600 total LEDs. So we're going to actually cut these to fit, and they're going to lay right down the middle like this. And to attach them, I'm going to use this foam double stick tape. This is actually thin tape that's meant for the single strip tape. I'm just going to double it up. That'll work fine. I'm also going to take it out of the silicone coating. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a few of these to fit. Now to cut them, it's basically just a matter of cutting them right here in the middle of this pad. There's actually a little scissor icon. So we're just going to snip it right at that point. And it looks like we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments per slat. So that's going to give you 20 total. And I have the math here. The whole length is 5 meters, 600 LEDs. Each segment has 6 LEDs. Whole length is 100 segments at 6 LEDs each. The total here looks like 100 segments at 50 millimeters each segment. There's 5,000 millimeters, obviously. And then it's just 1.968 of an inch, or just about 2 inches. Therefore, each segment is about 2 inches in length. It's 0.2 watts per LED, 1.2 watts per segment, and it's 120 watts the whole length, which is 12 volt, 10 amps. And then doing the math that I came up with was 20 whole segments. There's 6 LEDs per light, 120 total LEDs, which is 30 watts at 12 volt DC, and PSU required, which is about 3 amps. So that's exactly what we have coming in. It's a 3 amp power supply. And that was all based upon math from what I saw numbers wise online, and it looks like I was right on the money with the math. That's exactly 5 segments per piece. So at that, I'm just going to go ahead and get these all cut to length, and we'll move on to the next step. I actually wanted to see how waterproof these things would be, so I took a look at this end, which is just a rectangular silicone end that they had squeezed onto the end here, and it was actually glued on pretty good. But what's also equally impressive was they actually filled the end of the tape in with silicone. That's really nice. I would actually be pretty confident with this being waterproof. This would be great tape to put under like stairs, or your railing on your deck, or anything like that, maybe under a vehicle, or like in the bed of a pickup truck or something like that, because it's really bright. It's really nice, even bright white light. And here's one of those segments already cut, basically. What I'm going to do is, or what I already did, was just took a razor blade and just very carefully cut all around this tube from over here. This is actually right after the 5 pieces that I need, just to get it out of the way, because both ends are sealed. It's all in this tape. It'd very be hard to pull it through. Plus, I'm not going to really use this. It doesn't need to be in a waterproof container. It's kind of pointless. So yeah, we're just going to cut this right here, pair of scissors, and I'm going to do that every 5 segments like I need to. It looks like every 10 segments they have a solder joint, so at this point we can't cut it, we just have to simply remove the solder. And there we have it. That's the 4 segments that we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to cut the double stick tape, start mounting it into the back, and that will straighten them out as well, because right now it's just the loose copper in there basically that's making them form the way they are. So they do have flexibility to an extent. Obviously, when you have that rigidity of the outer tubing that makes it a lot nicer. I believe you can get these ends, so if you were doing this outside and you were cutting in the length, you could just cut the whole tube, solder your connection on, and then just pop one of these silicone in. But like I said, it doesn't need that, so we're not going to use it. And here's one of those strips with a double row of the tape on the back of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to the rest of them. As you can see, it gives it a little bit more rigidity. And it's nice because this is actually a foam tape, so this gives it a little bit of give. You know, if you're trying to form this to a surface, it's going to fit nicely. And I believe this is also 3M adhesive on here too. And here you can see we have all 4 pieces done. The way this is going to work is I'm going to take an end here and I'm going to fold it one way. I'm going to take the other end and fold it the other on both sides, and I'm going to stick them down, and then when I'm happy where they are, I'm going to actually take it and just start peeling it outward, and that backing is going to come off, and then I'll stick one side down, and I'll do the same thing on both sides, and then once those are down, then we'll have them soldered in place. And here's what I mean. So if this is bending this way, this is bending the other. I have both sides like that. I'm going to make sure also that I'm keeping the positive to the right, so that way the wiring is going to be a little bit easier for me. And this is going to go right here at the edge. And I'm just going to eyeball this. It's not critical. It's not going to be visible. And I'm just going to keep this flat like this. Make sure both sides of the tape stick out. And I'm just going to press this in place. So then you just take this double stick tape and you just pull it out sideways like this. And I'll do that on both sides. And then I just smooth it down. And I'll do this the whole way. Like that. I'm just going to repeat that process the whole way through. Here's all 4 units mounted. Just powering up one strip is quite bright. I went ahead and pre-tinned all the ends to make soldering the wires a lot easier too. That way, you know, it's one less thing I have to do when I actually solder these connections. Got my wire reel rack out. This is just rolls of 22 gauge wire. The top is solid, the bottom is stranded. So I'm going to go with the stranded. I actually have more green than anything. So I'm probably going to use the green for the positive wire on this and use the black for the negative. Just like I said, because I have more of it. And I'm going to go ahead and actually, we're going to do this in a series parallel configuration. So I'm actually going to connect these 2 together and these 2 together, and then those will connect right to the power supply. And I'll leave the leads up here. So I'm hoping to be able to put the power supply in the middle and then just connect this right to it. And then I'll connect the other ends at the bottom over those bottoms there. So those 2 will connect and those 2 will connect. So the way I'm doing this is I pre-tin the pad and I also pre-tin the wire, as you can see. And I'm using my helping hands to hold this. And I'm going to have the wire actually go to an angle to the left instead of coming straight out and trying to go that way. It would be a lot less strain on this piece. And also when I'm done, I'm going to get the hot glue gun out and I'm just going to get hot glued in. I may even put some liquid electrical tape on this when I'm done, just to really make sure this is secure. But that'll of course be a final thing, because once you do that, it makes it a lot harder to work with. And here's one of the connected pairs. You can see how I came down this way so the wires would be or in as close as possible, and they're going to stay there nice, especially like I said if I put some hot melt glue over here. And just to verify that they work, I'm going to go ahead and connect up the positive and negative here, and both strips should light up nicely. Yeah, that's really bright. This is going to fill that light box up nicely. I decided to put heat shrink over the wires instead of just leaving them out like that loose. This is what the end result's going to look like. It's a much neater connection, in my opinion. It's going to prevent that wire from getting messed up too, if this case gets moved around a lot. So the installation method is really not much different than what I did before, except this time I'm going to make sure I slip this piece in first, and I'm actually going to shrink this down. As you can see, I'm tinning the leads right now. But I actually have these things cut exactly to fit, and that's going to keep this wire nice and sturdy as well. As I wait for the hot glue gun to heat up, you can see how bright these lights are. It's actually causing the camera to go out of focus. And here we are back with the final two pieces of the puzzle: the power supply and the cord to go to it. Now, I just did a video on this recently of the unboxing of this. It was kind of a mailbag video, and it was another mailbag video when I initially got the LEDs and everything else I needed for that project. But basically, we're going to go ahead and give this a shot to see how this thing works. Now, there's a couple things we have to do first, and that's going to be to prep this. So what I'm going to do is cut this cord off right here, and we're going to skin it and peel it. Also, we're going to attach it to this power supply, and we're going to plug this thing in. I have an outlet right up off the screen here. We're going to test it out to make sure this works. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to take my fluke meter here, and we're going to set it to volts DC, and we're going to put it on the terminals here, and we're going to check it out and see what we're getting off of this. There is a volt adjust, so what I'm going to ultimately do is take my LED set, which is slightly off camera here, which is this guy here that I talked about earlier, and we're going to tie that into this power supply and at least power one section here and see what kind of voltage dip we have. And then ultimately I'm going to figure out how to mount this. Now, like I said, this is a lot smaller than I thought it was, so this is going to mount in that case really nicely. So we're just going to figure out where that's going to go, and then once I get that put in place, we'll run the wires from here to these strips, and we'll get this under a full load, and we'll adjust the power output on it just to make sure it's exactly at 12 volts to keep this perfect. With that, let me get started with some of this wiring here. I'm just going to simply take my pair of cutters here and cut this end off. We don't need it, no sense using it. I'm just going to 86 that. Plus, I want to make this as long as possible. Also, I'm going to skin this back pretty far because I need to have extra length in this. The best way I do this is with the razor blade. And if I just get this scored and don't go too deep and just kind of roll it, you should be able to get to the wire underneath. Now sometimes that insulation gets between the wires a little bit, so you have to kind of mess with this to break it. There it goes. You'll actually hear it snap. And this should just pull right off. And I'm going to use this. Now this should be, let's see if I can find it. This is 18 wire gauge. Which on this one here, right here. Now ultimately, this is not going to be set up this way. Ultimately, this is going to get hooked up to a switch, so this power supply can be shut off. I suppose you can actually put the power switch. You could do the switch on the 12 volt side and just turn off the LEDs, but why would you want that power supply running all the time when there's no load? So I'm just going to have a line switch. Okay, so we got these twisted up. Let's see. line is the black. And then we have neutral, which is the white. Just screw this in here. And then we got the green. Now, I'm not going to connect my LEDs yet, just in case this thing is not right. And I don't want to blow out what I just put together. So we'll check this out with the meter, which has got fuses and protection and whatnot. Alright, first test, plugging it in. I make sure I got this right. Line, black, neutral, white, green is on ground. Plug it in. It took a second, but we have the green LED glowing. So let's see if I get the meter out. And it's on volts DC. I gotta put the red one on the positive all the way over here and put this one on negative. And we're getting 11.25 volts. There's no load on this either. Once we put a load on it, that might bring up the voltage. That we're going to take a brief pause here for a second. I'm going to come right back to the camera and we'll get that LED hooked up. Let's take a moment to back up here and overview this project again, since it's kind of spread about multiple videos on my camera across a couple days and I need to pull it all together. So we have the grid that we set up, we got the power supply in, and this could fit between any of these places really. And I was going to initially run one wire from here to there and the same from here to there and make this kind of two separate segments. It's not really necessary. It's going to be the same load, I believe, on the power supply, honestly. So I'm just going to go ahead and tack these together as well. And I think I'm going to put this up at the top here and just run it directly. This is where we have the case. Now this will fit directly in. I'm not going to squeeze it into place, but they do fit into the holes. It will sit flat once it's bolted in properly. And yeah, this is just going to go up here. I think I'll actually turn it downwards like this, so I could use the open space below it right here to route the wires for the power through to here. And that hole is where the power cord is going to come fishing through. And I hope I can still reuse the same grommet that I have. If not, I have other ones I can use. And then I'm going to bring it over to here and attach the wires to the switch. And then I just have to run cable over to here. That's going to be pretty easy. That's where we're at right now with this. So the idea was where to put this, and I went to all the different places. I even tried putting it in the middle here, which was the best idea, but because of this ridge, balancing out would be kind of hard. I think I'm just going to rivet this in place from the back. So I have to drill holes out, and trying to rivet would make it pop one way or pop the other way, and it won't sit flat. So this is where I want to go, or down here maybe even. It's really 6 in one, half a dozen the other. It really doesn't matter where it goes. Just as long as I can route the wires nicely. Probably better for that up here, because then you can come down and go this way. See, that's part of all the design in my head, of where certain things are going to go, where does it make the most sense. You know, I wanted it closer to this over here, because that's where the power comes in. That's why I actually took the screws out of up here, so I can put this right here. But I felt it sat up just a little too high, and I was afraid it might block some of the light, because these are 120-degree angle lights. So some of that light this way might cause a shadow, and I didn't want that. So what I need to do now is basically get the final choice of where I'm going to put this. And then what I'll do is I'll come in here with a fine marker in here and back here somewhere. I'll mark those holes and I'll drill them out and then pop rivet them. And that will keep that perfectly still in there. And then, yeah, that's what I got for now. And I'm just going to cut this here and I'll come back to where I have some kind of a significant headway. Here's the middle bridged. I gave it kind of an extra room in the wire because the case has a little bit of a bend in it at this point, and I just want to make sure it cleared it. Alright, well, I managed to go ahead and get this mounted the way I think it will go in the case, which is going to be right here. I made a short lead that went from this power supply to the end of the lights here. The power will go through this strip, jump across, up, jump across, down, jump across, come back, and it just ends there. Yeah, it works very well. The kit was, you know, pretty easy to figure out what I needed. You could see I did that same heat shrink thing. You know, I want to keep these wires together. This is just the rudimentary setup. Like I said, if you want to plug this in here, see, it's pretty freaking bright. I mean, it just swamps the camera out. And this is a 10-watt LED shining down on it. I'm going to shut off. And you can see this is pretty bright. In fact, I'm going to shut the light off behind me here, which didn't do anything really for the camera. And see if I could do this without causing too much motion. Yeah. Take it off the tripod here. And you can see it's just completely lighting my ceiling up like crazy. Which makes me think, I have this wood fixture that I made with LED tape. You can see I just got this caution tape for kind of fun, just hanging on it. And I got a train set and some other things. It's not being used, that's why the cord is just wrapped around it. But this has got red, green, blue LED tape in it. The same 50-50 style bulb, but each one has a red, a green, a blue segment in it. So when you turn it on to white, while it is bright, it's not exactly pure white like this thing is. So I might just have to rebuild that using this kind of a system. I already have a transformer up there, so it'll just be a matter of either taking that old stripping off and replacing it, or just putting this next to it or whatnot. But yeah, that's really bright. So now I just got to get the power supply permanently mounted in that case and run the wiring to the switch and get that all straightened out, and that'll be the next update in the video. One thing I forgot to mention was I did actually test this under load, and it's still coming up at 11.24 volts. So I'm going to go ahead and take that adjustment and tweak it to see if I can get 12 volts out of the power supply. The lights seem like they were running perfectly fine, so I'm not too concerned about it, but I would like to get the nominal voltage out of it. Well, that didn't work. 11.24 to 11.33 ended up being the maximum. So that's where I'm going to leave it, because I can't go any higher. Now it's time to find the rivet. I have quite a bit of different ones here, you could see, and I went with the smallest one at the top so far. And if I look correctly, it just fit right in this hole. So that should do it for the rivet. I just got to mark the holes out and drill them. Not sure if that's going to be enough to bite that or not. I guess I want to find out. If not, I might have one here that's just a little longer than that. I guess we'll give that one a shot, see how it works. But I do want the one to be inside to be short, because there is, yeah, there's a little bit of clearance thing here with this board. Yeah, I want to make sure it's going to fit right, so I'm going to use the smaller one. And with that, let me go drill the holes out and we'll be right back. I got to mark this just by putting it in, making a dot, and, you know, it's simple. Got the 2 holes drilled, and as you can see, one of the rivets just sitting there, so I can kind of gauge this how it's going to work, and it looks like it's going to work really well. You see all the hole down there in the corner. So I'm going to hold this up here, and we're going to pop that in with the pop rivets. I managed to get it in there finally. Turns out my rivet gun doesn't like doing smaller rivets, even though it has the collet for it. It just didn't want to bite it. So I had to kind of finagle it a little bit. I had to take the collet and unscrew it just a little bit so it could back out, and then yeah, it took me all the better part of a half an hour, I feel like, to get 2 rivets in this thing. But alas, it's in there, it's solid, and this thing's so light you don't even notice the extra weight, honestly. It's perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull the power cord through, get it mounted up to here, and then run some wires up to that first before I mount the LEDs in here to make it a lot easier for myself. I took a walk out to my shed. I found some similar wire, so I'm going to use this to get from the power switch over to the actual power supply. And same thing with this. This is just going to connect the power supply's ground wire to the cord coming in. This is more than enough wire for what I need. This was just scrap wire that I had lying around from a, of course, previous project. Here's one side of the power switch done. I don't know if you can make it out or not, but I went ahead and soldered this to the switch, and I also heat shrink the wires. So if you open this case up, you don't accidentally get shocked. So I'm going to mount this switch, and then I'm going to solder the power cables on from the inside. That'll make it a lot easier. I actually went ahead and really made this easy for myself by pushing the wire through the hole and coming back out. You can see it goes in here and coming out through where the switch is. And if you follow it up here, you can see that I have the switch mounted in the claws of the helping hands. And here's a little bit of a pro tip. When your end of your wire is getting soldered to something and you plan on putting heat shrink tubing on, make sure you put the heat shrink tubing on first before you actually solder the connection. Or else you'll be looking to slide this up on here and you realize it's not on there. So yeah, put a nice old solder job on that. A big old glob of solder. You know what they say, there's either two sayings. The bigger the gob, the better the job, or a little dabble do ya. Well, with soldering it kind of goes both ways, honestly. Depends on the kind of joint you're looking to make. It's just like WD-40 and duct tape. If it's supposed to move and it doesn't, you use WD-40. If it's not supposed to move and it is, you use duct tape. And it's just one of those sayings. It's kind of what jack of all trades people like me live their life by. Well, with that, I'm going to get this finished up. I may put a piece of heat shrink along this just to keep that neat with the ground wire as well. We'll see. But I'm just going to go ahead and put these on here, mount the switches, see how it looks. It's important to note in areas where you have a wire-to-wire connection such as this, that the wires just simply don't touch and then solder together. You want to make sure you have a good mechanical connection as well. So right now these two wires are actually folded together to each other. So this is actually a tight bond as is, and then once I solder this, this will make this a much tighter connection. That's a key. Like, you could just go ahead, like I said, just lay the two wires next to each other and solder it, but that's not a reliable connection. This is much more reliable. I hope that I can make out what I did here. I did go ahead and heat shrink all that together. So we do have the 3 leads. That's going to connect right there. This is, of course, cut to perfect length. I put a knot in the end of the cord to keep it from pulling through. I'm not going to leave it like this. I will find one of those plastic, I'm not sure what they're called. It's not necessarily a grommet. I guess maybe it is a grommet, but there's a name for them. Clamshell or whatever it is. There was one here. It was 18. It was for an 18-2 wire. So this 18-3 wire will require a different one. So I do have those someplace. So I'll put one of them in. But you can see we just have the wires just zip tied. You know, this has got some not tension behind it. It's just loose. I did this to hold it, and they're soldered right into the switch, which is of course also heat shrinked on. And the ground wire runs right into that loom all the way up. I'm really happy the way that came out. I'm also going to put some heat shrink, or hot melt glue, I should say, all around here just to keep this switch nice and tight. This could be glued in and left like that, but I'm not really crazy about doing it that way. I want to do it the right way. Like I said, this is just here to hold this. I may or may not leave that. Well, this is what we got for now. In fact, I'm calling this project done, other than the one piece we need down here, which is the plastic clamp that's going to hold the wire in place. But other than that, this project's done. I'm going to give it back to the owner once I get that in, and he's going to install the plexiglass that he has at his house, and hopefully I can get a shot of that once it's completed. But you can see we got the power supply mounted up here nice in the corner. I actually drilled another hole next to a pre-existing hole and used a zip tie to hold that wire in place in the bottom before I mounted the bars with the lights on it. You'll also note that I've actually reversed it. I have the screws coming through the back and the bolt in the front here now. It gives the project a nicer look. You can see it's just screws in the back instead of the bolts popping through. I started cutting them to length, but I figured that was a better way to do it. Also, I surrounded them with glue, which will allow the bolt to stay here when you take the screw out, so that way it's like it's threaded almost. It'll make it easier if you ever have to remove this. Also, the wire for the top up here, I put some hot glue on it to keep that nice and tight, as well as all the other connectors. And it actually comes down under the board here and then just wraps right into the power supply. And these wires are nice and secure. Just have to get that clamp here like I said. But I'm just going to plug this in one more final time, show you how well this works. It does have a bit of a delay between the time you switch it on and it turns on, but that's expected. I'm going to actually let this run for a while just to see how warm this actually all gets. And then flip this over. Like I said, that's a 10-watt LED. And then this is this light, which completely swamps it out. And you can actually see that the 10-watt LED just makes a focused dot, where these strips just makes a nice even washed look, which I really like. So I guess my next project is going to be retrofitting this bar. But thanks for watching. This was a long video, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I sure did. It was a lot of fun putting this together. And if you have a custom project like this to work on, just give me a buzz. We can take care of it for you.